Sheriff, bring the jury in, please. All right, we're in session. Good afternoon, folks. The jurors are again present, and I believe Detective Red Richard is still on the stand. You have further questions, Mrs. Ellinger?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Your Honor, Met Published States Exhibit 228.
You may.
Detective Witcher, when we left off, I think we were proceeding to the barn area, and that's one of those gray squares on States Exhibit 228.
Yes, it is. It's right there in that location.
I'll show you what's been previously admitted as States Exhibit 191. Is that looking inside the front of that barn?
Yes, sir. That's an unsecured entrance. It's on the west side of that barn, facing the rear of the Berry home.
And going back to States Exhibit 228, can you point to roughly where that entrance is? And actually, States Exhibit 192. Is that, again, inside that barn area?
Yes, sir. That's inside the same barn, and that'll be facing back south. So once you walk in that unsecured entrance, just turn to your right, and that's your view.
And this area on the side of the barn, is that where the machete was found?
Yes, sir. The machete and another item as well was recovered in that area.
And what was the other item?
The other item was a jar of lotion or cream. It was marked secret, was the label on it. It was wrapped in a towel or a small hand towel, and it was shoved into the boards up above where the machete was.
And I guess it's part of the information that you had acquired from the investigation.
Yes, sir.
Going back to States Exhibit 191, we've heard a little bit and I think saw in the video about this green towel. Could you point out where the green towel was located in this barn?
Yes, sir. That's again the same entrance. As you walk in the unsecured entrance, you turn to your left, and this little area here is a washroom. There's a washer and dryer, and up above the washer and dryer, approximately 6 feet high above the elevated floor level right here, there were two rolled up towels. One was green and one was tan, and both of those were recovered as well.
Okay, both of those were seized.
Yes, sir.
Going back to States Exhibit 228, States Exhibit 228, marked on here, is that C and D are the green and tan towel and the black machete?
Yes, sir. Actually, C, which would be that area right there, that's the location where the machete and that secret lotion wrapped in the towel were recovered, and it was shoved in between those boards. And then the two towels, the green and tan towel in the washroom area is marked with D.
Next to the barn, I guess further south than the barn, there's another building, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Actually, one is an extension of that same barn. That's this area here. That's just a covered shed. And then there's a standalone building just to the south of those structures, and that's right here.
And that other building, can you tell what purpose it served?
It was being used for storage. It was full of miscellaneous sorted items. That was the building that had been commonly referred to as the old general store that was on that property.
So at some point in its history, it had been used as a general store?
Apparently so, yes, sir.
Eric, have Rich with us.
You may.
Detective, I can use some marks for identification purposes of States Exhibit 118 through 130. Could you look through those pictures?
Yes, sir.
Are those all pictures that depict the scene as you saw it back on July 24th of 2011?
Yes, sir, they are.
And they help illustrate your testimony to the jury?
Yes, they will.
Your Honor, at this time I move to enter States Exhibit 118 through 130.
Let me receive.
Detective, if I could start out with picture States Exhibit 124. Is this again looking down that southern end of the property?
Yes, sir, it is. That's as though your back would be facing Skinner Lane, and then you're looking in the driveway entrance for the Berry residence right there.
And that truck that's depicted, is that the one that says Critter Control on it?
Critter Catcher, yes, sir.
Okay.
That's the sign on the side of the door right there.
I'll show you States Exhibit 125. Could you indicate where that barn is that we were just looking at?
Right there, that's the unsecured entryway to that barn. And as we mentioned before, you would go in, turn to your left, that's where the two towels were recovered. If you went in and turned to your right, that's where the machete and the lotion marked Secret were recovered.
And jumping back to States Exhibit 228, could you indicate where that picture was taken and sort of the direction of the picture?
That picture, photograph had been taken from this area facing back towards that barn.
And that's that 120 quart cooler in the foreground of this picture?
Yes, sir. This right here, and this would be the far southeast corner of the primary Berry residence.
Going back to States Exhibit 228, there's two burn piles in the backyard of this house.
Yes, sir.
Turning your attention to States Exhibit 226. Is that one of those burn piles?
Yes, sir, it is. That would be the burn pile that's labeled as item J on the diagrams, the rearmost burn pile.
And is that located in this States Exhibit 228 under J?
Yes, it is.
Now, looking at that burn pile, I guess in the background of that, is that the back of the barn and the old general store that was on that property?
Yes, sir, it is. The vantage point from this photograph is that you're facing west. You're at the far east end of the property or the very back of the property. You're facing west. This would be the back of that storage building where those towels and the machete and the Secret lotion was recovered. This would be the rear of the building that's referred to as an old general store. And then the Berry residence would be on the other side of those structures.
And in this burn pile, did you locate a suitcase that we've seen already?
Yes, sir, we did. That item right there.
Moving on to States Exhibit 127, is that a closer view of that suitcase?
Yes, sir, it is.
Did you find anything else in that burn pile that you took note of?
Yes, sir, we did. There were multiple empty containers of bleach.
Showing you States Exhibit 128, again, is that just a closer view of that suitcase?
Yes, sir, it is.
This is States Exhibit 129. Where are we looking in this picture?
You're looking at the west side of the Berry residence. We discussed earlier where you would walk in, the door that was commonly used to go in and out of the house. That would be to your left, just off the left of the photograph view. This photograph is showing the hutch that was wrapped in moving type blankets and sitting out on the open porch.
And behind it, is that the second part of that hutch?
Yes, this would be the base. This would be the upper portion of the hutch. And then right here, I'd reference that third piece. That would be the wrapped top. It was like a marble top that would lay on top of this base.
Going back to the State's Exhibit 220, could you just indicate again where this object is located?
Yes, sir, it's right there.
Letter P.
Yes, sir, letter P on the diagram. Right there.
Now, we talked about letter J, I guess, which is the burn pile that's, I guess, in the farthest corner of the southeast corner of that property.
Yes, sir.
Item I, is that another debris pile?
Yes, sir, it is.
And what, if anything, did you find in that debris pile?
There was a cardboard box, and it had some empty beer cans and empty cigarette cartons. I think one of the boxes said referred to as a pet carrier. I think those items were recovered from that burn pile area.
Let me show you State's Exhibit 130. Is this just another view of that 120 quart cooler facing that old general store building?
Yes, sir, it is.
Now, if I could turn your attention to State's Exhibit 229, is that the diagram or schematic involving Oyster Creek?
Yes, sir, it is.
This diagram, you put this diagram together?
Yes, I did.
And about how far is it from the end, I guess the end of Karen Berry's property to where that boat is found down at the base of that creek?
Well, we took a measurement or paced off a measurement at the far southwest corner of the property because there was a pole, a power pole that was right there at the edge of the property. From that point to that boat, it's 196 feet. Obviously, it would be much shorter just walking across the yard and across the street since that boat is directly across from the property. But for measurement purposes, we used that pole at that southwest corner of the property.
Did you measure some other distances based off of that pole and another measuring point?
Yes, sir, multiple items.
And are those listed at the bottom of the page?
Yes, sir, those relative measurements are there. The reference point that I'm talking about being that pole would be the ones as R1 for reference point 1. The additional measurements on the right-hand side that's referenced as R2 or reference point 2 are from the southeast corner of the Berry residence.
And you paste those off to measure those distances?
Well, actually, we use a measuring wheel.
Now, across the street, that's where you found the path that leads down to the boat that we saw earlier today?
Yes, sir, and that's the pathway indicated right there on the diagram.
I'll show you State's Exhibit 118. Is this looking, what direction is this looking?
You're facing west. You're standing on the edge of Skinner Lane. The Berry property and residence would be to your back, and you're looking down this pathway to where a boat is located at the edge.
And going back to State's Exhibit 229, could you indicate where that picture was taken?
It's pretty small, but it's like you were standing here on the roadway facing down this pathway towards where the boat is located.
That pathway on this map, it appears brown. Could you describe its condition? And I'll show you State's Exhibit 118 again. Is it just cut grass or what was the...
Yeah, it had been somewhat maintained. I mean, it wasn't like a manicured lawn, but it had been cut down so you could come and go from that location. And it was our understanding that Shelton and Dalton kept that down so they could get down to their boat.
And Shelton and Dalton are Karen Berry's boys?
Yes.
And they're, around that time, they were around like 18 and 20 years old?
Yes, sir.
I'm showing you State's Exhibit 119 is after, I guess if you walked through that first picture, is this what you'd see?
Yes, sir. There was a series of photos that were taken as you progressed down that pathway just to show what you're looking at from different points along the trail. So as you start moving west down that trail, you keep taking photographs and you can see the boat at the water's edge.
I'll show you State's Exhibit 120. Again, is at that creek as it appeared that day.
Yes, sir, it is.
This is State's Exhibit 121, which has previously been shown to the jury. On the right side, was there some trash along that path?
Yes, sir, along the river's edge, there was various items of debris, including that old ice chest that we were talking about that I referred to as like a little sandwich cooler. There was some other debris in the grass around that area.
And that was the cooler that you mentioned earlier appeared very old to you?
Yes.
Like it had been outside for a long period of time?
Yes, sir.
And this boat that we saw this morning, is there a place, are there, I guess, for lack of a better term, 2 rows of seating?
In the boat itself?
Yeah, where would people sit if they were sitting?
Yeah, well, you have the back bench area and then the midship bench area as well. You have a small platform up here for anchoring.
If you were to put that 120 quart cooler in that boat, would it take up nearly all the space, I guess, in front of those seating areas?
It would take up a good amount of space. It's not a very large boat. It would either take up a good portion of this space here in between the midship seating bench and the rear 2 seating areas.
If you put 3 other coolers in there, it would take up a lot of that space as well?
Yes, sir.
In this picture, the creek appears pretty docile. Did you have an occasion to take the, I guess, the water temperature and measure the current?
Yes, sir. After, and I mentioned before about calling some other resources, but when the Houston Police Department dive team arrived, they document that type of information, and I requested that information from them, and they document it for safety concerns as well. But the current, although it appears very low, was measured at 0.85 knots, and again, it's flowing from southwest to northeast, and then the water temperature ranged from 85 to 90 degrees.
To be clear, the water temperature was 85 to 95 degrees.
Yes, sir. It was much hotter than that outside, but the water temperature itself was 85 to 90.
And going back to State's Exhibit 229, I guess, did you put arrows on this to indicate the flow of the creek?
Yes, sir.
And could you point out roughly on this diagram where Investigator Rescovich and the fire department boat entered the water?
On the 24th, they would have entered farther down southwest in this location here. It was outside our view. We stayed at the scene itself, and I say we, myself and Detective Gill and some of the other identification investigators, while Investigator Rescovich and Clark and the Richmond Fire Department traveled upstream, if you would, but farther southwest so they could find a landing to launch the boat. So it would have been down in this area somewhere.
If you go northeast, that is downriver, north on this picture,
Traveling that way?
Where does the creek lead to, or what happens in that direction?
Well, as the water flows in this portion of the creek from southwest to northeast, if you go up approximately, I measured it 3/10 of a mile, it passes under a bridge that goes underneath the Skinner Lane, and they have a water gate at that location. But Oyster Creek continues on down to the Gulf.
That water gate, are engineers able to close that?
Yes, sir. That particular water gate is used to catch debris that's flowing in the water to keep it from entangling underneath the bridge and then stopping up the water flow. So that's the purpose of that water gate.
At some point, was a water gate shut to stop this stream or the creek from flowing as fast?
Yes, sir. On the 24th, when we realized we needed to search this waterway, we contacted the Richmond Fire Department, and they notified the Gulf Coast Water Authority. That's the managing authority that governs the water flow of this particular creek. So we contacted them and explained to them that we needed to conduct a search of that creek in that area. So they began to close some of the dams that were farther upstream, if you will, down this area to help reduce the current and try to lower the waterfall. But that only has a limited effect, because at some point those dams become full and it overflows, and then you're back to the same situation again.
But for the purpose, I guess, of your search on that Sunday and I guess that Monday, the creek was slowed by controlling those dams?
Yes, sir.
I think where we sort of chronologically left off, you were searching the property. Investigator Oreskovich was going out on the water in that fire department boat. At some point, were you notified that some body parts had been found in the water?
Yes, sir. It was soon after, excuse me, soon after Investigator Oreskovich left with the fire department to begin their search, I received a call that she had located some apparent body parts.
And then were you aware that those body parts were then brought ashore and laid out in that blanket that we saw earlier today?
Yes, I traveled across the street at the time of their recovery.
And
Yes.
Whereabouts was that done, where the body parts were laid out?
Where they were laid out after they were recovered from the water, they were brought back to this landing, the same landing right here, cleared area.
And then what happened to those parts of the body that were recovered?
Well, the ID investigators photographed them to document their appearance, and at that time I notified the death investigator that was on duty at that time, who requested an autopsy. Then arrangements were made to have those body parts transported to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy.
What is a death investigator?
Well, in our county, we do not have, we're not of the population to warrant a coroner, so we use the Justice of the Peace system. And a death investigator works for the local Justices of the Peace, and they make the determinations of cause of death as far as death for death certificate purposes. So it would take a Justice of the Peace or someone appointed to act in his stead to order an autopsy. And in this case, that's what the death investigator was doing. He was coming out, reviewing the information, and ordering an autopsy to be performed.
Where do, in this case with these body parts and I guess with any death that's ordered an autopsy, where is the autopsy performed in Fort Bend County?
Fort Bend County contracts with the Galveston County Medical Examiner's Office, so they would be transported to their facility in Texas City.
And was that done in this case?
Yes, sir, it was.
And was Dr. Navi Mambo one of the physicians who did the autopsy?
Yes, sir. He was the assigned pathologist with the Medical Examiner's Office.
On that Sunday, July 24th, I guess in that afternoon, after these body parts, the parts of the torso and leg had been recovered, and they were sent to have an autopsy, what else happened at the scene that day?
On the 24th?
Yes, sir.
Well, those body parts were recovered. They continued on with the search as best as they could, but the search was hampered by the growth across the top of the creek. They weren't able to get the boats through there to conduct a search. The dive team for the Richmond Fire Department were unable to conduct a complete and thorough search of the waterway. So at that point, we summoned some assistance from the Houston Police Department dive team, along with the use of a cadaver dog that's trained in locating deceased people.
And were they able to come out on that Sunday, July 24th?
No, sir, that was later in the evening. It was, it takes longer to respond than that, and it was about to be dark. So we maintained the scene, secured all the area, and then that search was scheduled. The search by the Houston dive team, Houston Police Department dive team, was scheduled to begin that following morning, which would have been Monday the 25th.
And on that Monday morning, at that point, I guess you had people actually in the water trying to recover parts of the body?
Yes, sir.
And on this State's Exhibit 229, the schematic, items 2 and 3, if you could point to those, I guess, on the screen, that's where those two parts of the torso are found?
Yes, sir. Items 2 and 3 are marking the upper and lower portions of the torso that were recovered on the 24th, which was the day that we initially responded out there, that Sunday. In addition to one more body part marked as number 4.
And that was the part of the leg that we saw earlier?
Yes, sir.
At some point, did you or other investigators walk along the banks of this creek to determine if there was any other evidence in the woods that border this creek?
Yes, sir. We searched this area here as far as we could on both sides. And also a visual search was conducted on this side from the boat. Investigator Oreskovich and Investigator Clark. But once this discovery was made, I was notified by Investigator Oreskovich, and I traveled over to this location on the bank in order to get a general measurement of where they were in respect to everything else that we were recovering.
And I think you noted this on the diagram. About how far is it between object number one, that boat that we saw this morning, and the area where the torso is recovered?
The upper and lower torsos were recovered approximately 50 yards to the northeast of where the boat was recovered. And that's an approximate measurement because it was heavily wooded and you're trying to pace it through the wooded area. But it was approximately 50 yards.
In those areas where the torso is found, was that the first section of the creek where the foliage crosses the creek to the point that it'd be difficult to get through?
Yes, sir, it is.
And on here, I believe you marked an item Q, which I think is referred to as a floor mat. Could you explain how you found that object?
Yeah, so before when we mentioned walking this area and searching for evidence, that included the edge of the roadway as well as going through the woods along the edge of the creek. As I was walking along the edge of the roadway, I noticed a dark gray, looked like a rear floor mat that was sitting on the west side of the road. So we noted that and had it collected as well.
When you collect something, is it just out of abundance of caution to make sure that it could be related to this case, or it might not?
Yes, if you have any reason to believe that it could possibly be associated with what you're investigating, you get it documented and collected if possible.
Aside from that floor mat, was there anything found of relevance to this case in the, I guess, along that creek bank on either side that y'all walked up and down?
Other than those items that I've already mentioned here, not that day. There was an additional item that was recovered later on, weeks later though.
Okay. And was that another body part?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Before we get to that, I guess we're on Monday, July 25th. Did you go back out to the scene and assist with the Houston dive team search of the waters?
Yes, I did.
And at some point in that day, what happened?
With the Houston dive team, what happened? There was a lot that occurred on the 25th, but with the Houston dive team, they recovered an additional leg, section of leg, and they also recovered Laura's head.
And did you mark those locations of those body parts as numbers 5 and 6 on this diagram?
Yes, sir, I did.
And were those taken out of the water and put on the shore bank, much like they were on the 24th?
Yes, sir, they were wrapped in like a cloth type material and brought to the shore.
What else happened on July 25th as part of your investigation?
Well, some of the other things that occurred, I was notified by Investigator Schneider with Fort Bend County Environmental Department, and he's a deputy with that agency or a section of the agency. And I was advised of the recovery of some containers of muriatic acid and some recovery of some surveillance photographs in connection with that.
Okay. And Investigator Schneider, what role does he have with the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Department?
He's assigned to the environmental unit, and they investigate crimes that could impact our environment, including dumping is a large part of their work.
Did you have a chance to go to where those items were recovered?
Yes, sir, I did.
Our published States Exhibit 32.
You may.
Investigator, it's kind of difficult to see, but this place is marked as Karen Berry residence, is that the Skinner Lane location where Karen Berry lived?
Yes, this would be Skinner Lane, and this would be the section of Oyster Creek.
And this area where these this acid was recovered, where was this in relation to Karen Berry's residence?
If you would continue traveling northeast on Skinner Lane until it dead ends, it's approximately 1.6 miles from the Berry property. It was in that dead end area of Skinner Lane where those containers of muriatic acid were recovered.
And while we move that way on this map, is this the area where the creek goes underneath the road that you're referring to?
Could you zoom in a little bit more, please? Yes, sir, it is.
Are there some subdivisions near Skinner Lane?
Yes, sir. As you approach the Highway 99 corridor, there are.
And is this the dead end of Skinner Lane?
Yes, it is.
And you went out there and there was some acid that was recovered from that scene?
Yes, sir. I went out there after the acid was recovered, but that is the location that Investigator Schneider with the environmental unit had reported recovering both the photographs and the containers of muriatic acid.
All right, approach the witness.
You may.
So could I hand you his finger? Marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit A242. And could you look inside here?
Yes. Yes, sir.
And is that one of the bottles that was recovered by Agent Schneider and passed off to you?
Yes. Yes, sir, it is.
Your Honor, this time I would move to enter State's Exhibit A242.
No, very soon.
And you held that up, is it a bottle of acid?
Yes, sir, it is.
And what kind of acid is that?
Muriatic acid.
On that Monday, July 25th, after those parts of a body were recovered, at this point you had recovered two parts of a torso, a part of a leg, and then there was another leg part and a head found on the 25th.
Correct.
On that day, what further investigation did you conduct?
On the 25th,
Yes, sir.
we were notified of another individual that had some information, and we traveled to the scene. We returned to the scene and were conducting a follow-up inspection of the property and the grounds.
At this time, when the Houston dive team, I guess, is in the waterway, was the area cordoned off such that people or media couldn't get back there?
Yes, it was.
And if we go back to State's Exhibit 229, where was the road cordoned off so people couldn't get to this area?
Well, this pathway was cordoned off leading down to the creek here, and this area from here down, there was some barbed wire fencing that was up, and no one was allowed in that area as well. There was another open pathway farther down Skinner Lane, and that was cordoned off. And the media were restricted to a vacant lot up in that area.
But this area, even on the 25th, as the search continues, this area is still secure and a crime scene log is being kept of who's coming in, who's coming out?
Yes, it is.
At some point on the 26th, was this property returned back to, I guess, Karen Berry and the boys who live there?
Yes, sir.
On the 25th and on the 26th, as your investigation continued, did you note everything that you found on this diagram?
Yes, sir.
At some point, was your attention drawn to the septic tank on Karen Berry's property?
Yes, sir, it was. That would have been on the 26th.
And was that based off of information that had been acquired through interviews?
Yes, sir.
And how did you attempt to inspect, I guess, or know where the septic tank was on the property?
Well, on the 26th, we met with Ms. Berry again and obtained another consent to search, just to verify that she was continuing to allow access to her property. And that septic tank was located back behind the barn right here in this area. So we inspected that septic tank area to see if there was a need to do additional search in the tank itself, but discovered that there was some old timber and there was a lot of items piled on top of it that had been there obviously for an extended period of time. So that tank had not been recently accessed.
And that's on this map is point R.
On that map,
Yes, sir.
bear with me.
States Exhibit 229.
Yes, on 229 it's R. And then there's another diagram that it has another label, but
Okay.
on 229 it's R.
And then on States Exhibit 228, it might have a different label.
Yes, sir, it's Q.
But that's where the septic tank was located on her property.
Yes, sir.
As your investigation continued, on the 25th, what further investigation did you do?
On the 25th, there was some additional investigation that was conducted up at some ATM machines. That was by Detective Latour.
And that was Detective Latour from the Raleigh Police Department.
Yes, sir.
Actually, before we get to the ATM, States Exhibit A148 and A147 are these both pictures of the boat that you seized from the property on the 24th?
Yes, sir, it is, the 12-foot Grumman boat.
And that boat that we saw this morning, that was put on the trailer that Investigator Oreskovich had with her?
Yes, it was put on a trailer and then wrapped, secured in a tarp, and then transported to the inside of a secure storage bay, and that's where that photograph was taken.
And these pictures, A147 and A148, they depict the boat as it sat there in that secure facility?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I move to enter States Exhibit A147 and A148.
None be received.
Moving on to Detective Latour went and pursued some records from banks in the Katy, Texas area, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And did you become aware of some information involving this defendant, Amanda Hayes, and some ATMs?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what was that information?
There was two ATM transactions that occurred, and this was information that was based on some records that Detective Latour and the Raleigh Police Department had available to them, in addition to information that they had apparently learned from Ms. Karen Berry during an interview. But those transactions occurred on July the 19th of 2011, the first being at 9:37 a.m. The second transaction was the following day, which was July 20th of 2011 at 11:08 a.m.
I'll show you what's noted as States Exhibits 552 and 555 for identification purposes. Are those ATM photographs from the first ATM stop by Ms. Hayes, the defendant?
Yes, sir. The one on July 19th of 2011, they're printed at the bottom of the photographs.
And do those depict Ms. Hayes at a walk-up ATM?
Yes, they do.
Okay. Now, State's Exhibit 553 and 554. Do those both depict Ms. Hayes at a different ATM?
Yes, this ATM is at a bank. It's at a Bank of America located at the intersection of Mason and the Grand Parkway, which is Highway 99, not far from this other location. And she's conducting an ATM transaction at a drive-up ATM.
Your Honor, at this time I move to enter State's Exhibits 552 through 555.
Let me receive.
Your Honor, may I publish this?
You may.
Detective, I show you State's Exhibit 552. To start with, on the bottom right of this picture, does it note a time on there?
Yes, it does.
Does it
Date
appear
and
to
time.
say July 19th at 9:37 a.m.?
Yes, sir.
And on the left bottom corner, does it appear to indicate Fry-Grand
Yes, sir.
ATM?
Yes, sir. And Grand is another name for the Grand Parkway, which is Highway 99.
And you had some records that showed that Ms. Hayes, the defendant in this case, took out money from this ATM on July 19th at 9:37 a.m.?
I was made aware that those records had been obtained by the Raleigh Police Department. Yes, sir.
And were you made aware of how much money was taken out by Ms. Hayes at this ATM?
I don't recall the specific amount of the withdrawal, no.
Your Honor, may I publish State's Exhibit 32 at this time?
You may.
Going back to this map, could you tell the jury where this ATM is located in Katy, Texas?
Yes, this is the Grand Parkway here. And if you were to go out onto the Grand Parkway and then travel in a northern direction, and you'd have to zoom in to where I could see the Mason and Fry Road area.
And earlier today, were you present as we marked these
Yes.
locations on State's Exhibit 32? And zooming in here to this building, is this the intersection of Fry and Grand?
Yes, sir, it is.
And
This is Fry, and this would be the Grand Parkway.
that's, I guess, an ATM right there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there a Home Depot located in close proximity to this area?
Yes, sir, directly across the street. This is the Home Depot in that same shopping center area.
And did you become aware that some items that possibly had evidentiary value to you were purchased at that Home Depot on that day?
Yes, sir. There were 8 gallons of muriatic acid that were purchased. I believe it was a 32-gallon plastic garbage can, and there were the neoprene long cuff chemical gloves that were purchased at that Home Depot.
And did that information also include a video that showed Grant Hayes actually purchasing the items?
Yes, they had a video of Grant Hayes making a purchase of those items.
And that occurred after this ATM withdrawal had occurred seemingly across the street?
Yes, specifically the checkout time at the Home Depot was 47 minutes after the ATM withdrawal was made by Amanda right here.
And then, going back to State's Exhibit 552, and State's Exhibit 555, are those both depictions of Ms. Hayes making that withdrawal?
Yes, those photographs are coming from the camera installed in the ATM machine.
And there's a truck in the back of this picture. That is a different truck than Shelton's black F-150 that we saw on the property, correct?
Yes, but that would be the Home Depot in the background.
But to be clear, this truck right here is not the vehicle that was found on Karen Berry's property.
Correct, that is not that same vehicle.
Looking at State's Exhibit 553, is this the next day July 20th, an ATM transaction from July 20th?
Yeah, yes, sir, it is, July 20th at 11:08 a.m.
And here, can you see the, I guess, top of the word critter or catcher?
Yes, sir, that's the top portion of the sign, Critter Catchers. It's on the side of Shelton's truck.
And does that appear to be Amanda Hayes making an ATM withdrawal?
Yes.
Can you see anyone else in that truck?
No, I do not see anyone else in the truck.
And moving on to State's Exhibit 554, that again, another image from that ATM withdrawal.
Yes, it is.
That was at 11:09 a.m. on July 20th.
Yes, and that second photograph, I believe the first one is 11:08. It's the same transaction.
This photograph indicates Waterside Marketplace.
Yes, sir, that's a little shopping center that's at the intersection of Mason Road and Highway 99.
Your Honor, may I publish State's Exhibit 32?
You may.
Where is that in relation to this Home Depot and ATM?
It should be south. Right there. It's going to be a Bank of America at that location, the intersection of Mason and Highway 99, or the Grand Parkway.
So this road that we see going north-south intersects with Grand Parkway, which travels east-west, and there's an ATM around that location?
Yes, sir.
And that's where that ATM was located?
Yes, sir.
And to be clear, that ATM is closer to Karen Berry's residence than the other ATM?
Yes.
And the other ATM is closer to the the Home Depot facility, is that correct?
Yes.
Additionally, did you have some investigation to determine if there was a U-Haul facility located nearby?
Yes, sir. I learned there's multiple U-Haul facilities around, but there was one in particular of interest on I-10, just inside of Harris County.
And is that also marked on the State's Exhibit 32?
Yes, sir, and that would also be referred to as the Katy area.
And is that where this U-Haul location is?
Yes, sir.
And did you have some information that the trailer that had been rented here in Raleigh had been returned to that Katy, Texas location?
Yes, sir. Actually, that information was relayed to me by Detective Gill as soon as I arrived on that Sunday. Detective Gill and Detective Latour had initially traveled to that U-Haul location and verified that trailer unit had been returned at that specific location.
And at that point, did you have someone seize that trailer at the U-Haul location?
Actually, Detectives Gill and Latour had arranged for that to occur with one of the Harris County Sheriff's deputies. So they secured that trailer until our identification unit could go out and transport it to our office.
So the Harris County, which I guess the county where Houston's located,
Yes.
they seized the U-Haul trailer, took it back to their facility, and then investigator arrested it, shipped it back to Fort Bend County from there?
Correct.
And the whole time that these maneuvers are being done, are you instructing people to not touch things with a non-gloved hand and preserve all the evidence?
Yes, and that's the purpose of having them secured in a secure evidence processing area. Harris County's would be similar to ours in that regard.
That, I think where we left off, that next day, showing me State's Exhibit 229, when the head and another part of the leg had been found, again, were those transported to the Galveston County Medical Examiner's Office for an autopsy?
Yes, sir, they were.
That next day, on the 26th, what other areas did you investigate as part of this case?
Well, the 26th, after learning some of the information that was shared by Karen Berry, that was relayed to me by the Raleigh detectives, we returned to the scene one more time and continued with the search. And that's when the focal point became on the hog pen area. And that's when the soil samples were collected from the hog pen area, and the neoprene long cuff glove carton was recovered, as well as the fencing. That was all recovered on the 26th.
And after that, did you release that scene back to Karen Berry and conclude conclude your investigation in that property?
Well, actually, after that, we conducted yet another walk through the property just to make sure there was no other items of interest that were being overlooked. And that is the day we had mentioned earlier. As I was exiting, I saw a small black plastic bag that was underneath the plants there along the edge of the driveway. So we had that collected and preserved as well. And after we finished our walkthrough, then we departed the scene.
Now, some days later, did you become aware of another body part being recovered in that creek?
Yes, sir. On August the 11th, the Gulf Coast Water Authority that we mentioned earlier, they conduct routine cleanings of these water gates along the bridges, or in the area of the bridges to keep the water flowing, because the water gates will get stopped up as well. As they were doing that at a location that's approximately 3/10 of a mile northeast of the Berry property, while they had their machinery out there and they were removing this debris, they ran across an item that they feared to be a body part. So they contacted the sheriff's office. Detective Dahlia Simons, who works with me, traveled to the location and verified what they were looking at was appeared to be a section of leg. We again contacted the Justice of the Peace, had yet another autopsy order issued, and again had that body part transported to the Galveston County Medical Examiner's office.
So in this case, there were 3 separate autopsies in the Galveston County Medical Examiner's office?
Yes, sir. That's why you have 3 separate autopsy reports.
And the first one being for the 2 parts of the torso and the leg?
Yes, sir. Recovered on the 24th.
And then the second one being the head and another part of the leg?
Yes, sir. Recovered on the 25th by the dive team.
And then the last one was the part of the leg that you just spoke of?
Right. Recovered on August the 11th.
And had you told, I guess, folks at that Gulf Coast Water facility or whoever controls that creek, had you informed them of what was going on so they could keep a lookout for any body parts?
Yes, sir. Actually, they were made aware of that back on the 24th when the Richmond Fire Department supervisor had contacted them and requested that the dams be closed and the reason why. And so they had been made aware of that prior to that August 11th discovery.
After the 26th, did you have any further, and aside from that event on August 3rd, did you have any further investigation into this case?
Yes, sir. I was contacted by Detective Gill with the Raleigh Police Department and was advised that arrangements had been made to transport the body of Laura Ackerson back to Raleigh for additional examination and was asked if I would assist in that escort, and I did.
Your Honor, come for the witness.
You may.
Detective, I have to show you State's Exhibit. It's identified as State's Exhibit 224 through 227. Could you look at those?
Yes, sir.
And first of all, those are not graphic in nature, correct?
No, they are not.
And what do those depict?
These are photographs that I took at the time of Laura Ackerson being placed into a metal transport casket and then again inside of another transport box container in preparation for flight to Raleigh.
And do those pictures depict the measures that were taken to ensure that the parts of the body as they arrived in North Carolina were undisturbed from when they left the medical examiner's office in Texas?
Yes, sir, they do.
Your Honor, this time I move to enter State's Exhibit 224 to 227.
Let all be received.
May I publish State's Exhibit 224?
You may.
Detective Richard, what does this depict in this picture?
That's the top of the metal transport casket, and you can see that it's inside this cardboard shipping container. At this point, Laura has already been placed inside the transport casket. The top has been sealed with metal screws, and I'd placed evidence tape on the edge of the container, the opening of the container, signed, initial, and timed and dated each one.
show you States Exhibit 225. Is that, I guess, tape that you put on the outside of the container to make sure that when it was received in North Carolina, nothing had been changed?
Yes, it is.
I'll show you States Exhibit 226. Is that the outside covering of that casket or box?
Yes, it is. The metal transport casket is inside that cardboard shipping box.
States Exhibit 227. Is that, I guess, the company and the information to accompany that box back to North Carolina?
Yes.
Okay. After you, I guess, watched this be packaged, did you accompany this body to the airport?
Yes. I identified the individual that was going to be driving her that they had been contracted with by Raleigh authorities. Identified him. He worked for the transport company. Searched his vehicle to make sure that there was no other containers or persons in that vehicle with him. And then I maintained a visual of Laura being placed into that transport vehicle and then stayed with them all the way until they arrived at the airport.
And eventually, did you see that loaded onto an airplane to return her back home?
Yes, I stayed with that box until it was loaded onto a Continental aircraft and they were airborne.
And at any point during this process, did anyone touch the remains or affect them in any way such that when the medical examiner's office in North Carolina got them, it should be any different than how they left the medical examiner's office in Galveston?
No, sir.
After this procedure was completed, did you have any further investigation in this case?
No, sir, I did not.
You searched that creek side area as part of your investigation?
Yes.
Okay, and the waterway was actually searched by the Houston dive team and by folks with by Fort Bend County Sheriff's investigators with another boat?
Yes.
Okay. At any point, were any arms found?
No, sir.
Any hands found?
No, sir.
Clothing, was that any clothing found in that creek area?
No, sir.
Was a cell phone found or a recorder found?
No, sir.
Or a purse?
No.
At anywhere on those premises, not just the creek, but Karen Berry's house or that property, none of those items were found anywhere there?
No, sir. None of the items you've just mentioned were located.
Thank you. Nothing further.
All right, Mr. Gaskins, you have questions?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Good afternoon, Detective Witcher. Let me, if I may, talk to you about that John boat, and if I could have, if Mr. Zellinger would be kind enough to put on the screen what I recall is Exhibit A-147. I believe I heard you testify earlier, correct me if I'm wrong, that is a 12-foot long John boat.
Yes, it appeared to be a 12-foot long Grumman aluminum flat bottom boat.
And how wide is it?
The width, I don't know. I didn't measure the width.
It's an aluminum boat, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
It's not a boat that is intended to carry a lot of people, is it? Would that be fair to say?
No.
What
In
it's
comparison to larger boats, no, sir.
What it's generally used for is fishing on a pond, things of that nature.
Yes, sir.
Correct? Now, in the back of that boat, well let me ask first. Mr. Zellinger asked you if there was room on that boat for 4 coolers. Do you recall that?
For 4 coolers?
For 4 coolers. or maybe he didn't say 4, there's limited space on that boat between the seats, isn't there?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that, you've testified that there were 2 coolers found at Karen Berry's residence in Texas.
Yes, a 75 quart and a 120 quart.
Were you aware also that there were 2 additional coolers that had been at that residence but had been taken back to Kinston, North Carolina?
Yes, I had heard that information.
So there ultimately 4 large coolers were in Texas at some point in time, correct?
Yes.
There's not room on that boat for 4 large coolers and 2 adults, is there?
Yes.
Think there is?
Yes, sir.
Well, as I'm looking at the boat, I see 2 seats.
Yes, sir.
Am I correct?
Right.
Between the 2 seats, how much space do we have?
Oh, I'd give an estimate, 3 feet.
And in front of the first seat, how much room do we have?
A little less, maybe 2.5. Two and a half feet front to back.
Okay.
That's an estimate. I would have to measure it to give you an exact number.
What are the dimensions of a 120 quart full cooler? Do you know?
I can give you an estimate, approximately 1.5 feet by 3 feet.
Well, I think there's one, well, there was one here in the courtroom. Looks like it's gone elsewhere. So we have, what, 220 quart coolers and 2 75 quart coolers, right? Or is...
Well, you had asked if I was aware that there was 2 additional coolers that had been transported from the Skinner Lane back
Yes, sir.
to Raleigh by Amanda and Grant.
Yes, sir.
I was made aware of that. I was not made aware of, nor do I have knowledge of the size of those 2 coolers.
Okay.
But my point was, and you asked a question, if I feel there's room for those, is that if there's room for 2, there's room for 4, because you can stack one cooler on top of the other cooler.
Okay, and then if you have 2 adults on that boat, tell me how stable is that going to be?
I can't answer that. I mean, we would have to go out on the water and get 2 adults and put 2 or 4 coolers in there, and then we could see.
See
But
if you could do it.
I can't give you an estimate of how stable it would be.
Well, if you had 4 coolers on there and a 2 adults, what I'm hearing you say, you correct me if I'm wrong, is that you think it's possible, but it would be very cracked.
Well, I can say this from personal experience. I've gone fishing on a boat that size with 3 men my size and a large cooler with a motor on it and gas and a battery for the motor for a live well. And yes, it can be done if you're not out in the rough water. That's what I'm basing my opinion on.
Okay, that's fine. Let me ask you this. In the very back of a John boat and all small craft, there is a hole, isn't there?
Yes, a
And-
bilge
and-
plug.
And the purpose for that hole is so that if the boat takes on water, when you pull it out of the water, you take the plug, we call it the plug, don't we?
Yes, sir.
You take the plug out and the water that has accumulated in the boat drains out of the boat.
Yes, sir. That's one purpose, or for cleaning. Yes, sir.
And when the boat is pulled out of the water and left up on the bank, on the shore, or the bank of the creek, as this one had been, that's the time when you pull the plug out of the back of the boat, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Because you want all the water to drain out so that the next time you use it, it doesn't have water in it.
Well, it would be a twofold reason. If you did have water in the boat, I would pull the plug. As being a boat owner, I would pull the plug so the water would run out. The other reason would be if I'm going to leave it stored on the side of the bank, I don't want it to fill up with water from the rain. So I would pull it so that the water could drain out from the rain.
So you want to get, when you launch the boat again, you don't want any water in there, do you?
Right.
Now, if the boat is launched without putting that plug back in before it gets back into water, you got a problem, don't you?
Yes.
And do you recall, of course, we were all, I think, downstairs just a little while ago looking at this boat. Do you recall seeing that the plug in this John boat was tied to a rope and was actually plugged into the hole, the drain out of the back of the boat?
Are you talking about when you just went downstairs and
Yes,
viewed
sir,
it
when we went
today?
downstairs.
I mean, how it appeared today?
Yes, sir.
I can't answer that, sir. I didn't approach the boat. I was standing back unless I was called on for some reason.
May I approach witness John?
All right.
Let me ask you, Detective Witcher, if at any time that you've inspected the boat, you recall seeing how the Shelton boys had arranged the plug that goes into the back of the boat. Do you ever recall paying attention to that?
I don't have a specific recall of that. I would have to view the scene photos to see if that's depicted in there.
We'll take a look at what I've marked as Exhibit 53 and ask you if that helps you recall how they arranged to keep that plug seated.
Okay, I don't recognize this photo, and no, it does not help me with that recollection. I'm not sure when this photo would have been taken in comparison to the recovery of the boat back on July 24th of 2011.
Do you recall that there was an anchor back there?
I recall a mushroom-style anchor being in the boat. I recall some rope being in the boat attached to the bow. I recall two oars. I recall a red plastic container that I believe was a Folgers container, Folgers coffee container. And like I mentioned before, before I could comment on the presence of a plug, rubber expandable plug, which would be common for that boat, I would need to refer back to scene photos and or video of the actual recovery site and recovery time of that boat.
But we don't have any disagreement that there's got to be a plug for that hole, right?
Either a design plug or a homemade plug or something needs to be stuck in that hole or it's going to take on water.
And exactly. If you launch that boat without putting the plug back in, once it's been pulled out of the water and you put it back in the water, it's going to start taking on water quickly, isn't it?
It will take on water at the rate that can flow through that hole, yes, sir.
And the stability of that boat, if there's no plug in it, once it gets back into the water, it becomes very precarious, doesn't it?
For a matter of time it would until it lands on the bottom.
Do you see in this photograph that there is a red baler at the back of the boat?
Yes, that appears to be the red empty Folgers coffee container I was referring to.
And what the Berry boys had done was to cut something in half to use as a baler, am I right?
If you have a photograph of that close up, I could tell you I don't remember that container being cut in half. I just remember it being an empty Folgers coffee container.
Okay.
It may have been cut in half, but I don't remember that.
Well, you may be right.
Okay.
Normally with a baler, you cut something in half.
Well, those red Folger coffee containers, the opening is as wide as the container itself. It has a molded-in handle. I believe that may have been what the purpose of having that Folgers container in that boat was, as a baler.
Whether there are coolers on that boat or whether there are not, if the plug hasn't been put in the boat when it was launched, then the stability of that boat is going to become very precarious, isn't it?
It's going to take on water, yes, sir.
And when it takes on water, that water is going to come in through the stern, isn't it?
Yes.
That's where the hole is. And that's where the problem is going to begin, isn't it?
It's going to take on water, and in that style boat, it's going to have a ribbed bottom. It's going to flow underneath those seats, and the water will continue to flow all the way up to the front of the boat. So if you're asking, is the back going to go down first or the front going to go down first, I can't answer that. It may take on water evenly if the weight is distributed evenly and go down altogether. But certainly it wouldn't float for long. If you went out with that plug out of that boat, loaded down, you aren't going to be in the water very long at all.
It's going to be a problem, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned at some point that you had used a cadaver dog.
Yes, sir. We called for a cadaver dog.
And that is a dog that is it, does it make any difference what breed a cadaver dog is, or can any dog be trained to
Sir, I'm not an expert dog handler nor a dog trainer, so I can't answer that. What I can tell you is that a cadaver dog is trained in detecting the scent of cadaverine, the odor given off by a human corpse during decomposition.
And you used the cadaver dog in this case, but as I understood it, the cadaver dog wasn't actually able to help you find body parts. Am I right?
Well, we used a cadaver dog. It was a cadaver dog that was being handled by a member of the Houston Police Department. It came out and was searching along the banks of the waterway. If you're asking if the scent of cadaverine was detected, you would need to speak to the dog handler. I can tell you that I smelled the scent myself, so I would imagine that the dog should have been able to pick up on the scent as well.
You know the scent.
Yes.
How quickly, when you say you know the scent, are you talking about the smell of decomposition?
Yes, sir.
You also talked about a purchase that Amanda made at the ATM on July 19th at 9:37 a.m. So we bring that photograph up, Mr. Zollinger.
Just a second. Okay, July 19th at 9:37 a.m.
Yes, sir. Refresh my memory. What was that? The Fry Grand Parkway, or was that some?
Yes, sir. It was actually on Fry Road at the intersection of Grand Parkway. It was to the immediate south of the Home Depot where the other purchases were made by Grant. That's what this photograph here depicts.
This is a photograph taken as she's standing in front of the camera at the ATM machine?
Yes, sir.
Was there a second photograph? Well, how many photographs were taken by that camera that you retrieved?
I didn't personally retrieve them. Those were retrieved by Detective Latour with the Raleigh Police Department, who traveled to that scene. I viewed these after they were recovered. I can't tell you if how many were in a series of images that were recovered by the bank.
So how many did we use here? Two?
Two.
Could you bring the other one up?
Yes, sir, right there.
Mr. Zellinger asked you some questions about the truck that's in the background.
Yes, sir.
Do you know who that truck belongs to?
Who that truck belongs to?
Yes, sir.
No, sir, I do not. I know that's not Shelton's truck, though.
That's not the truck that has Critter Catcher on.
Right. Well, more specifically in this photo,
Yes, sir.
Shelton's truck also has a tap-out sticker. It's a big emblem that he has in the center of the window on the back of his truck. That one does not.
This isn't the one that has the sign on it, in other words.
Correct. It is not.
Do you see Grant in that photograph?
No, sir, I don't.
Do you see the 3 children in that photograph?
No, sir, I do not.
You are and were then aware that there were 3 children who were taken to Texas with Grant and Amanda, correct?
Yes, 2 children that were Laura Ackerson's, and then 1 infant child that is Amanda's.
So as we look at this photograph, Grant is someplace with those 3 children.
Objection.
It's sustained.
Well, the
Sustained.
children aren't here, right?
Ask some answers.
Sustained.
Grant and Grant's not. Okay.
I mean,
Let's look at the other photograph, from July 20th, I think is where I intend to be. This photograph is taken at the Waterside Marketplace withdrawal.
Yes, sir. This photograph is taken from the drive-up ATM machine at Bank of America that is located within the Waterside Marketplace Center, there at Mason Road and Highway 99.
Grant is not in this vehicle, is he?
I can't answer that.
Can you see?
I can tell you that I can't see Grant in that photograph, but I can't see the entire interior of that vehicle.
Okay. So you don't know where Grant is in this moment, if he's in the truck or not in the truck?
Right. All I can tell you from that photograph, based on that limited information, is that what I'm looking at right there is that that's Amanda making a transaction at that ATM machine.
You see any children in that truck?
No, sir, I do not.
Do I have one, John?
sure. Anything else?
Have 1 minute, Your Honor.
All right.
Your Honor, can I approach the witness?
All right.
This actually hands you has been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit A100. Shortly after that ATM transaction on July 19th that you were just asked about, was there some video acquired from Home Depot?
Yes, sir, there was.
Or was that some 47 minutes later?
The checkout time on the transaction that was made by Grant Hayes at the Home Depot was 47 minutes after the transaction time recorded for Amanda Hayes' withdrawal at the ATM.
Your Honor, this time I moved to enter State's Exhibit A100.
May be received.
And I published this.
You may. How long is it?
It should be around 5 minutes.
Okay.
I apologize, it's going to take me 1 second to bring it up.
Sorry.
Not clear. this appear to be from January 19th at 10:50 a.m.?
Yes, it does.
Detective, does this depict the point of sale location for the cash registers in that Home Depot?
Yes, sir, it does.
And here at 11:24 and 30 seconds, do you see Grant Hayes walking up with a barrel and what appears to be some of those boxes of muriatic acid?
Yes, sir. And one additional item we discovered later through the receipt.
And what was that additional item?
That was a pair of long cuff neoprene chemical gloves.
You're just asking questions about whether you can see the children with Amanda Hayes at the ATM. Do you see the children with Grant Hayes at 11:24 that day?
No, sir, I do not.
And here do you see Grant Hayes appearing to pay with cash?
Yes, sir.
Here at 11:25 and around 30 seconds, do you see him appear to be getting his change?
Yes, sir.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, anything else?
No further questions.
Okay, thank you, officer, Mr. Hendon. It's about 4 o'clock. Folks, we're going to take about a 10-minute break. Don't discuss the case among yourselves. Keep an open mind. Don't form or express any opinion about the guilt or innocence defendant and any matter in controversy. Follow my previous instructions. Take about 10 minutes and then come on back. The jury room will proceed on. Thank you.